Hello, and welcome to the Skillful podcast, where we explore DBT and RODBT skills to help you reduce emotional suffering, improve your relationships, and become more present in your life. I'm your host, Marielle Berg, a psychotherapist at the Bay Area DBT and Couples Counseling Center. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
We are going to continue diving into the distress tolerance skills with talking today about two different skills. One is called distracting and the other one is called self-soothing. And so these are skills that won't solve problems, are skills you want to think about not overusing, and we'll talk in a little bit about why, but they can be really helpful when you are emotionally overwhelmed and don't know what to do and need something to help get you through the moment.
I think when we talk about distracting and self-soothing in group, oftentimes what comes up is that people feel like they've been using a lot of distraction to cope with their distress. They've been doing that quite a bit, and they feel like they're overusing it. And what I appreciate about these skills is that, we overuse distraction when we're overwhelmed because it's so effective. And to conscientiously use distraction to bring our emotional distress down can be so helpful. The trick is to then be able to move on to something else, to move on to problem solving if that's what we need, to figure out what to do next, and not just, okay, I'm going to watch TV all day. I'm using my skills. But sometimes it's like, you know what, today I cannot. It's just the most effective thing is to use distraction, and I'll try again tomorrow.
Yes.
Sometimes that's wise.
Yeah. So what you're talking about here are the nuances with this skill, and I think with all of them. So there isn't kind of black and white thinking here. And I think you're right on target when you say, or let me back up. Distraction gets a really bad rap. There's a lot of negative things we can hear about distraction. And so the way we talk about distraction here is not kind of that like mindlessly checking your phone or just, distracting yourself by replaying, a fight in your head kind of over and over, or, flipping through channels. I don't know if people still do that.
I do, but maybe I'm just really old.
So it's not that. So this is much more focused. It's intentional, and it can be really helpful if done with that in mind. And the reason why there can be some pushback or like, isn't it bad to distract, is that a lot of people have the experience, like you were talking about a moment ago, with using distraction as a way to sort of avoid.
Right.
Yeah. And so we're talking about something a little different here.
Right. I think it is the, consciously distracting in order to relieve stress is very different than unconsciously avoiding.
Yes.
And we can get into the nuances of that.
Yeah. So with distraction and with self-soothing, we want to think about like not overusing it and using it very strategically.
That's what I was going to say, strategically.
Yeah. So it's purposeful distraction.
Right.
Because sometimes fully experiencing our emotions actually isn't a good thing for us.
Right.
Which I think can take some people by surprise. Like, wait, I'm supposed to not feel my emotion? And we'd say, yes, sometimes it's better to not fully feel it.
Right. I think when emotions are already pretty overwhelming, oftentimes what we talked about in terms of accessing wise mind, that balance between emotion mind and reasonable mind, if emotions are really, really strong, it's hard to access that reasonable side. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we need a break from the emotions in order to get back to a more balanced way of thinking. And distraction and self-soothing can really help with getting back to that balance.
Let's give some examples. So suppose you're in a work meeting and you have an overwhelming urge to start sobbing or telling someone off. It's probably wise to not let those feelings out. So that would be an example of when not fully experiencing our emotion in the moment is actually a positive thing.
Yeah.
Or, if you have the urge to send 20, 30, 100 texts to someone, say you're dating and you're upset with them, it's probably better to not act on that emotion as well, because it'll create additional problems.
Yeah. And I think sometimes even sending one text, it's like if I, for instance, the dating context of like, I really want to know what's going on. I haven't heard from this person. I'm making all these assumptions about what they're thinking and why they haven't responded to me. And I just want to send a text, but maybe that's not the wise thing to do. Maybe waiting would be valuable.
Right.
But I'm really anxious about what's happening here. Distraction or self-soothing could be really wise.
Yes, I've been there. I'm sure you have too, with different relationships. Yeah, right.
We could do a whole podcast on that.
I don't know who hasn't been, where like it feels there's a sense of relief in the moment. Like, yeah, I told them off, or I got that out. But then, a couple hours later, there can be like, oh shoot, like I wish I hadn't said that.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So this is a great time to think about using distraction skills. So just to recap, these are skills to use when you're feeling really emotionally overwhelmed and when you have urges to do things you are going to later regret. So some kind of emotional outburst, the way we just talked about. I think it's also helpful when you feel an overwhelming urgency to fix a problem right away, like you want to fix this immediately. And that can be behind some of these kind of impulsive texts. So there's some kind of conflict with someone you're close to, and you want to just solve it. And when we do that, when we're in emotion mind, it can lead to bigger problems because it can lead to maybe abruptly ending a relationship or, impulsively quitting a job that maybe days later you're like, oh, like I wish I hadn't have done that.
Or saying something to bring relief that then makes it more complicated and harder to repair.
Yes. I'm thinking about the kind of the satisfaction one can have in the moment. And I'm realizing I'm saying one instead of I with slamming a door. Like that can feel really good.
One might feel satisfaction.
Slamming a door. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, I don't feel so good about myself.
Right. Yep.
So when we're in emotion mind, our action urges can be really convincing. We can feel really justified in slamming that door, telling someone off. And we can also feel like engaging in any kind of self-harm, any kind of addictive or compulsive behavior seems smart in the moment.
Right. Like that sense of like it from an emotion mind place of I have to do this. This is wise, that there's no other options. And right there's some cues that I might not be in wise mind. We're like, I have to, there's no options. Like maybe this is extreme and out of balance.
Yeah. And I think often people, especially with those kind of self-harm, addictive behaviors, it does help in the moment. I mean, it serves as a form of distraction.
Right.
The problem is it has these other unintended negative consequences.
Right. And I think that like distraction in particular, like using something to just check out is often something that we as humans will use excessively when we don't know how to manage strong emotions, in the same way that we might use compulsive behaviors or self-harm or those kinds of things. And I feel like conscientiously using distraction to take the edge off brings no long-term consequences in the same way that choosing to use an addictive behavior would bring longer-term consequences.
Yes. And so if anyone's listening who has some of those self-harm or addictive behaviors, and we're going to talk about the acronym we use, which is Wise Mind Accepts, and we'll talk about what each letter of accept stands for. It might seem ridiculous. If you're used to reaching for drugs or alcohol or self-harming, and we suggest to you, take a bubble bath. You might be like, hell no, I'm not going to do anything. So know that it is not going to work in the same way that, it's sort of like a bludgeon when you reach for some of those things,
right?
Drugs, alcohol, self-harming. I mean, that can sort of obliterate the suffering you're in. So that these distract activities won't do that. They will hopefully help you calm down enough or bring down the emotional overwhelm enough for you to think about other skills to use.
Exactly. Or just to have, like I feel like distracting and self-soothing often take a little longer to kick in for the emotion to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's no consequences when the emotion is down.
Yes.
Whereas other things can work really quickly, but then there's shame, there's guilt, there's regret, there's stuff to clean up.
Totally.
So this is like maybe a little bit of a shorter kind of thing and more effective in the long run, which is why DBT puts a big focus on it.
Yeah. More effective in helping people live the lives they want and achieve their goals.
Right.
Yeah. And creates a lot less chaos and shame and all the things you talked about. So should we go into the acronym and talk about what it stands for?
Definitely.
Okay. So we are working out of, as always, Marsha Linehan's DBT skills training handouts and worksheets, which we will link to in our show notes. And so this skill distracting has an acronym, as many things in DBT have or do. Very acronym full. So it's called Wise Mind Accepts. And so the acronym is ACCEPTS, which is ACCEPTS.
Wise Mind Accepts stands for distracting with activities, with contributing, with comparisons, with different emotions, that's the E, with pushing away, with other thoughts, and with other sensations.
Okay, great. Thank you. Should we start with activities?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
So basically, any activity that we can do that can take our focus off of whatever it is that's causing distress. So it can be, as simple as watching TV or watching videos, playing games. It can be going for a walk, playing some sort of sport or something like that, building something, doing something like knitting or those kinds of things, crossword puzzles, anything that can really hold our attention, an activity that can hold our attention so that we're not just stuck in the loop of thoughts around whatever is causing our stress.
Right. So the whole point of this is to shift our focus onto something else. So instead of ruminating, obsessing, playing those tapes over and over of the things that are upsetting you, instead of getting on that train of upsetting thoughts or overwhelming emotion, it's redirecting your attention towards something else. And this could be such a range of things, depending on who you are and what you prefer to do and what is called for in the moment. It could be cleaning something.
Right. Yeah.
It could, as you said, obviously watching something. And there's a big difference between, watching your favorite show for a half hour, an hour, because you're feeling really emotionally overwhelmed and you want to bring down that emotion versus, as we talked about in the beginning, spending all day doing that. Right. Occasionally, that might be needed. If you are extremely upset or distraught, sometimes we need to take a bit of a vacation from life, and that can be useful, but we just want to be really careful about not overusing that, because then that will create its own problems.
And I think where using activities for distraction is valuable is checking in and like conscientiously saying, for me, I love Sudoku because it is something like really simple, straightforward. It's numbers. So I'm not going to be thinking too much about stuff. And I am just going to play this game and, try to solve this little puzzle and focus my attention and check in when I'm done. And if my emotions are still high, I'm going to play another one, right? I'm conscientiously doing this and I'm checking in to see, okay, where am I at? Do I need to start problem solving? Do I need to kind of do something different? Or, you know what? My emotions are still really high. I need to keep doing this activity because I'm not going to be able to think clearly until those emotions come down.
Right. Okay. And so I've never played Sudoku. So when you play it, do you like solve a puzzle?
It's like a numbers thing where it's like you have to slot numbers in to create within lines and rows and columns and boxes so that you have 1 through 9 in each one.
Okay. Because I'm thinking about how that kind of particular activity or distracting activity might be very satisfying because there's an order to it.
An order, you can accomplish something. So that's where
Yes.
some games, puzzles, those kinds of things. Now, crossword puzzles, never, under no circumstances will I do that. That's frustrating. Sudoku, oh yeah, that's wonderful. So again, the activities that we use to distract, it's whatever works for us.
Yes.
and figuring out what are the activities that I do that really hold my attention when I need to shift focus away from stress and worry.
Yes. And I'm thinking about times when I've had to study for big licensing exams, of which I've taken several in my life, that my, sock and underwear drawers were never as neat as they will ever be again, because there would be, overwhelming emotions, usually anxiety and fear, and, just feeling overwhelmed with the task ahead of me. And it was very satisfying. Like, I'm just going to organize my sock drawer. And then
Right.
you have a finished product. It's something you can control.
Right.
Granted, if I did that all day, every day, while I'm supposed to study, I'm not going to get anything done.
Right.
But time limited, similar to your Sudoku, it can be really effective. So it does not have to be something where there is a finished product that sort of gets, wrapped up neatly with a bow. But if you think that might be helpful for you, you can think about doing distracting activities that will allow you to have that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and not ones that are going to overwhelm you if you are not a big crossword puzzle fan. No. And I'm with you on that, especially if you're really emotionally overwhelmed. It takes a lot of focus.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know people who like crossword puzzles are their thing. That's where they can just shift their mind into that gear and it will take their focus away. So that whatever works for you.
Mm-hmm. And so with this, there's a lot of experimenting and playing around to see what is going to be most effective to help you bring down that emotional overwhelm. So the next letter in accepts, we did the A for activities. We'll move on to the first C, which is contributing. The second C is comparison, and I think there's some overlap between these two. So contributing is basically doing nice things for others. So helping out a friend. If you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, there is no shortage, unfortunately, of opportunities. You walk down the street, you can buy a homeless person a meal. What this does is it takes your mind off your worries and your emotional overwhelm. And I think it can also have this secondary benefit of creating a sense of like purpose or meaning in your life.
Right. So different than just using an activity to just simply take your mind off of things. Contributing is like I am specifically getting outside of myself to do something for others, which is a way of distracting with a shift in focus that often brings some positive emotion with it. Yes.
So it has that added benefit. This is something that's built into 12-step programs when they talk about service.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think because it's recognized how powerful contributing can be to one's sense of self, to helping with emotional overwhelm. A friend of mine during the last holiday season was going through a really painful, unexpected breakup and planned for Thanksgiving and Christmas to do volunteer work. One was serving a meal to people at a homeless shelter, and the other one was doing a suicide watch on the Golden Gate Bridge, because it's a time when people are really vulnerable and feeling lonely. And so she sort of planned ahead, knowing that to distract herself from her own pain and suffering, that helping out others was going to be useful. So you can think about doing this ahead of time if you anticipate that you're going to be struggling emotionally, because some of this takes a little bit of planning if you want to be volunteering somewhere, for example.
Right. Yep.
So let's move on to the next C, which is comparing. And there's some overlap, I think, between contributing and comparing. So if you're contributing or helping others out, another thing that can happen is using comparisons to help put your suffering in perspective. So my friend who was going through that painful breakup, when she was feeding people at the homeless shelter, it put her pain in some perspective. Yes, she was heartbroken. Yes, this was unexpected. And she had a roof over her head, and she had a hot meal, to eat at the end of the day. And that kind of comparing can be really helpful when we're emotionally overwhelmed.
And I think that using comparisons specifically for distraction is taking your mind off of your own problems right now and thinking about, for instance, comparing yourself now to other times in your life when you've struggled. Oftentimes we can get a perspective from that of like, oh, I've actually had harder circumstances, more challenging circumstances, and I got through those.
Yes.
Comparing ourselves to other people going through the same thing and being able to say, yeah, I'm not the only one
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this. Like you said, comparing to people who may be suffering even more and being able to, not like in a shaming way of like, oh, you have it so, I have it so easy,
Right.
have no reason to be upset. But like, yeah, I think, and this is the dialectical thinking of like, yeah, I'm really struggling right now, and other people are struggling in a different way that's even more profound.
Yes.
And that brings that perspective. So I think that comparison is all about using our focus to shift perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, with this too, there's no shortage of different, stories to read or documentaries to watch about other people struggling. And it's not to minimize our own pain, or like, I don't, why should I be heartbroken because I just went through a breakup when people are dying in war or starving all over
Right.
the world? It's not to do that, but it's to, as you said, give a little shift in perspective, and that can bring down emotional overwhelm. And just recently, I was talking to a friend. I was really upset because there was some water damage in my home, which was, and I'm still dealing with it, which obviously is not fun and is a big deal, obviously, to me. And as I was talking to my friend, she let me know that someone we both know was recently diagnosed with terminal cancer and had months to live.
Mm,
And immediately, of course, I was saddened to hear about this, but immediately I was like, oh, yeah, here I think this thing I'm going through in my home is devastating. And let's put this in perspective.
right. And I think that comparison actually can be like so valuable for distracting from overwhelming emotion, and it can be risky. So if you
Yes.
have to know yourself, so if you have a tendency to minimize your struggles, or the whole idea of self-invalidation of like, I have nothing to complain about, like this is no big deal. Well, if you're having strong emotions, it's a big deal for you right now. Right.
Yes.
And so accepting that that's where it's at, and using comparison wisely. And which is where I think oftentimes comparing this situation to other situations in my life can actually be a really effective way to do that, to compare myself to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a way, if you tend towards self-invalidation, you might be able to say, hey, I'm going through something right now. I've been through other hard times in the past.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, because that can be a tricky one. Do you want to get us started with the E for different emotions?
Yeah, I think that this is also can be really helpful. So, specifically trying to change our emotion. And one of the big things in emotion regulation in DBT is we talk about accepting emotions, noticing emotions, not trying to shift emotions for no reason at all, right? Just like the emotions are what they are. But when emotions are really overwhelming, sometimes it helps to say, you know what? Instead of feeling sad, I'm going to focus on laughing and
Mm-hmm.
watch a comedy show that's going to make me laugh, because my sadness is so overwhelming. I need to take a break from it and shift into another emotion. I'm feeling really angry. I'm going to listen to some sad music, right? I am feeling really worried. I am going to watch a movie that's really got a lot of action and adventure, and kind of like get into the adventure of that. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
really trying to do something to very consciously feel a different emotion than the one that's causing us distress right now.
Yeah. And so, in order to do this, obviously, you have to know what emotion you're feeling first.
Right.
And then be careful, if you're feeling really sad, don't watch a sad movie
Right.
or listen to sad music. Find something that's going to evoke a different emotion.
Oftentimes, comedy is the emotion that we might want to use to build up a sense of laughter about
Mm-hmm.
something. Because when I am feeling a lot of emotional distress, I'm usually taking it very, very seriously. And being able to laugh kind of helps me to recognize, like, oh, this is not everything in my life at this moment. There's
Yes.
other things out there. It can shift away from the anger or the fear into being able to laugh. It just kind of like totally takes a break from that other feeling, that then I can come back with a different perspective. My emotional distress is lower.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the P in accepts. So the P is for pushing away. And this is shutting out or blocking your attention from whatever is upsetting you. It's sort of like putting your pain in a box and sticking it on a shelf temporarily, or imagining a wall between you and others who are upsetting you, or between you and the situation that's hard. And a lot of people kind of get this when we talk about it. It's more abstract, but most people can sort of understand, because we all do it in one way or another. It's a little bit related to, I think, dissociation, where we're just like, I'm just not going to look at that. Which, if
Right.
we do that all the time, it's going to create problems. We need to look
Right.
at hard stuff to
Right.
grow and heal. But this is a strategic way of saying, this is too hard. It's too overwhelming. I'm going to put it aside for a little bit.
And I think that there's a difference between consciously pushing away, saying, I am noticing the emotion I'm having and I'm putting it to the side. I'm consciously putting it to the side, and dissociating when we're triggered and we don't even know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this is where it's like, I recognize what's happening right now and I'm consciously pushing it away. One of the suggestions in the workbook is, like, if we notice that we're ruminating, like thinking about something repetitively and stuck in that loop, just yelling no, right?
Mm-hmm,
And so,
mm-hmm.
like, noticing, like, I'm starting to feel angry again. Nope, not right now. Not right now.
Yeah.
Not doing that now. And just like a kind of a simple way to not inflame the emotion.
Right. And I know for myself, if I'm obsessing or ruminating, I often think like, I'm going to figure it out.
Mm,
And that, I think, can be related to that when we feel this strong desire to solve a problem immediately. Like, if I think about the situation for the millionth time, I'm finally going to figure it out, or I'm going to fix it, which never happens.
right. And again, that's the, like, emotion mind can kind of trick us into thinking we're being reasonable. Oh, I'm figuring this out. But the emotion is so strong that we're missing things, we're ignoring things, we're like not seeing the
Right.
whole picture.
Yeah.
And so if I notice my emotion is really high, rather than necessarily, for instance, doing an activity, I'm just pushing it away and saying, nope, not right now, taking a break right now.
Mm-hmm. So useful.
And then, kind of related to that is that with the T in accepts is that we can distract with other thoughts. So often emotional distress comes with so much thinking. So use our thoughts to shift our focus. So, for instance, counting colors in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So shift my thoughts into, I am going to count every place in this room that has red in it. And then I'm going to count everything that has blue. We can use our thoughts to kind of remember words to a song. Let me try to remember the words to this song and repeat that to myself, or words to a poem, or we can, for instance, there's a lot of overlap in these, like do a puzzle, do some sort of puzzle where my thoughts are really focused. So instead of letting our thoughts just run in a way that's going to create distress, we focus our thoughts on something other than what we're trying to think about.
Yes. And then the last letter in our acronym accepts is S, which is for sensations. So this is engaging in other sensations, other intense sensations. So you can let an ice cube melt in your hand, or drink ice cold water, put a rubber band on your wrist and let it snap, suck on a piece of lemon or sour candy, maybe listen to music really loudly, like something sort of intense that engages our senses, that can kind of shock you out of that, going down that road of that intense emotion, and especially sort of shock you out of engaging in some of those self-harming crisis urges.
Right. I think there's some similarity to the tip skill that we talked about.
Yes.
Which uses cold temperature on our face, cold around your eyes, or intense exercise, something kind of shocking. And so just using our senses to shock ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think this is especially helpful because sometimes I can't shift my thoughts. My thoughts are stuck on, and it's like, I can try to push away. I can try to shift my thoughts. It's not working. So then I am going to hold a piece of ice until it's totally melted.
A lot of the urges we have when our SUDs are our subjective units of distress, which we've talked about in previous episodes, is really high. Or another way of saying this is when our emotional overwhelm is really high. A lot of the behaviors people turn to involve the body in one way or another. And so sensations can be really useful, engaging in other intense sensations that won't actually create any kind of significant problem down the road.
Right. Yeah. which kind of segues nicely into another skill set that can help with distress tolerance, which is self-soothing, and specifically soothing ourselves using our senses.
Mm-hmm. So self-soothing serves multiple functions. It certainly can help distract you in the moment. As we've been talking about distraction, it's another way to distract when you are feeling overwhelming emotions. So it helps you not do anything that's going to make the situation worse. And it's a great one because it really works on a physiological level, because it can put us in a state of relaxation. So when we're emotionally overwhelmed, our sympathetic nervous system is on board. And that's a part of our nervous system that is really related to trauma responses. So our sympathetic nervous system helps us fight back if we're being attacked in some way, helps us flee if we need to run away to be safe, or freeze if we need to do that to hide and escape danger. So when our sympathetic nervous system is online, our heart's beating fast, our pulse is high, our whole system is sort of geared up for action.
Mm-hmm.
And that can happen a lot when we're really emotionally overwhelmed. Hence the emotional outbursts, the reaching for some self-harming behavior to relieve some of that activation in the system, the slamming the door, any of those kind of things we might do when we're upset. And self-soothing helps bring our parasympathetic nervous system online, which is the part of our nervous system which helps us relax. So if we can do self-soothing behaviors and we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, we might notice that our breathing slows down and deepens, our heart stops beating so quickly, our blood pressure lowers, so it really can calm you down. So that's an added benefit. It can help with our digestion, because when you're emotionally upset, your stomach might be in knots.
Yeah, I think that self-soothing is kind of a form of distraction that's really focused on relaxation, more specifically, and also focused on the idea that when we're emotionally overwhelmed, we need comfort.
Yes.
And validating that, which can be really hard at times. I think that we often feel a sense of like, I don't deserve to soothe myself. I don't deserve to have relaxation. I'm really upset. I need to push through this. I need to get going. And self soothing, I think, also has the benefit of building up our ability to say, you know what? I need soothing sometimes.
Yes.
In order to be in balance, I'm going to need comfort sometimes. So I'm going to consciously give it to myself.
Yeah, it sends a message to ourselves that we're worth caring for. And this piece, as you were saying, can be really hard, because for a lot of people growing up, they were not met consistently with this kind of care and soothing when they were really upset. And this ties into the emotional invalidation piece. So if you were regularly told, like, oh, get over it, or pushed through, or maybe even mocked or potentially punished
Mm.
when you were struggling emotionally, there's a good chance that self-soothing initially might feel hard, because often we wind up parenting ourselves the way we were parented.
Right. And so this is creating a shift, conscientiously dealing with overwhelming emotion by soothing ourselves. And another aspect that I think is valuable is that oftentimes people feel like, I can't soothe myself. I need someone else to do it.
Yeah.
But what if someone else isn't available? What if
Mhm.
there's not somebody who's really in tune enough to give us the comfort that we need in that moment? This gives us more power to figure out, what do I need for comfort and soothing? I give that to myself, so that when we do get soothing from others, we can actually appreciate it. But we're not
Yes.
desperate for it.
Right. We're not demanding that others do that. And so in addition to sometimes people feeling angry or like, why do I have to do this myself? Shame can come up. I think that's related to the piece you said a little bit earlier around like, I don't deserve this, or it's self-indulgent. So these are just things to watch out for. And if you relate to any of this, self-soothing might be particularly challenging. And we encourage you to try it and kind of try
Right.
it over and over, because over time, it does get easier.
And one of the things when in our skills group, every group we ask people, what skills did you practice during the week? And self-soothing is probably the number one that comes up.
Yes.
When we talk specifically about self-soothing in group and teach self-soothing, oftentimes people start with like, I don't know about this one. I don't know. This will be hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that conscientiously saying, I am going to make an effort to soothe myself, people start to really get into it.
Yeah. And they realize um, how effective some of these small ways of engaging our senses, which is what self-soothing is about, how effective it can be in shifting our focus and how it feels good.
Right.
And we all need that. And just a caveat, as we said, with distraction. So self-soothing, some people can sometimes overuse it, and it's not an end all be all. So if every time you get in a fight with your significant other, you decide, I am going to
Take a bath.
I'm going to take a bubble bath. So great. I think that's a wonderful thing. It can be a wonderful thing to do to bring down your emotional overwhelm. But if you stop there, you might never resolve some of the issues in your relationship. So you can use taking the bubble bath after the fight to help you calm down enough. But at some point, you're going to have to think about problem solving and coming back to it and talking to your significant other, having a conversation when you're calmer, seeing if you can, seeing if there's ways to resolve some of the ongoing conflicts. So it doesn't solve any problems, but it helps us get into wise mind so we can hopefully solve some of these problems. Should we talk about the different senses?
Yeah, so I think that in the workbook, it talks about ideas for self-soothing using each of our five senses. So, for instance, with vision, being able to look at things that are soothing, looking at pictures or lighting a candle and watching it burn, getting flowers for yourself, going for a walk and really looking around you. So there's a lot of overlap between the self-soothing techniques and mindfulness techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to be in the moment, enjoying, for instance, looking at things that really feel calming and soothing to us.
Yeah. And then the next one is hearing. So that's listening to music you like. If you are near the ocean, going there or any kind of body of water and listening anywhere in nature really can be lovely if you have access to that. That could sometimes also be just opening your window and listening to the sounds around you. Maybe there's trees rustling, maybe there are birds. It could be even the sounds of the city. If you're in an urban landscape, if you find that soothing, kind of that hustle and bustle of the sounds around you.
Yeah, I think the one that people tend to use the most is listening to music.
Music,
like just
of course.
Music that we like, music that you enjoy, music that fits whatever you're trying, whatever kind of soothing you need. Using that is really can be so valuable.
Yes. The next one is smell, using our sense of smell.
So, lighting incense or having like a favorite soap or shampoo or something and really making an effort to notice the smells of that. One of the suggestions in the book is like just opening a bag of coffee and smelling
Oh my
it,
God,
right?
it's heaven.
Yeah. So like, it's like just like finding things that you can use your sense of smell to activate this sense of calm, of interest, of soothing, smelling flowers, whatever it is that can help activate that for you.
Yes. The next one is taste. And so if you struggle with any kind of disordered eating, this one might be trickier. So you can talk about it with someone else, or if you're in therapy with your individual therapist. But so this is basically just eating like a small bit of one of your favorite foods or comfort foods, or chewing a favorite gum, or getting, a hot drink that you really love.
Right. There's lots of possibilities, right? So that thinking about mindfully enjoying the taste of something that is comforting and soothing to you.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of developing a sense of like, oh, okay, if I have a cup of tea right now, this particular tea that I really like, that's going to give me a little bit of time to feel like I'm soothing myself and come down from my high emotion.
Yes. And the last one is touch. And so that might be, we've mentioned the hot bath, petting a dog or cat can feel really good. Having a soft blanket to kind of snuggle up in, putting clean sheets on the bed, getting a massage.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a whole number of things.
So with all of these self-soothing techniques, it's really highlighting the way that our senses bring us soothing.
Yeah.
Our senses bring us comfort, and thinking about what are my options for something that will help me feel soothed using my senses, any of
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely. And it sends, again, as we said a little while ago, it sends a message like, I matter, I'm worth caring for.
Mhm.
And so it has multiple functions.
And oftentimes, when we're emotionally upset, we need care. So,
Yes.
providing some care to ourselves can be exactly what it is that we're looking for in that moment, even if we're not fully aware of that because we're overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think this is a great place to wrap up for today. Thank you for exploring these skills with me.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
All right. Until next time. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To learn more, or if you're in the Bay Area and want to get started with therapy, you can find us online at bayareadbtcc.com. That's bayareadbtcc.com.